turning back.
Welcome to the Lost Boy Scouts podcast. I'm Danny.
And I'm Tyler. Thank you for joining us yet again.
Yep, episode 3. Here we are.
Just keep after it.
Yeah, it's been fun. We had a little hiccup on the episode 2, which was awesome because we were able to gather and rally, and it didn't even seem like it happened.
Yeah, no, little blip, but again, white belt here. So
Yeah, for sure.
give us a little bit of a break. So.
Yeah, guys. So we did have some more feedback. Some of our friends reached out to us and told us that they've fallen along, that they appreciated what we were talking about, and that they were able to really relate to some of the things that we talked about, especially in reinvention. Yeah. And reinvention is one of those things where we could talk about it for a long time because there's just so many things you can cover in that.
Right. It could be a standalone podcast in and of itself.
For sure. Yeah. And then that's what we were talking about today. We were like, well, what's next? What's the journey? What does it continue on? And part of us is that we really want to incorporate our path and our love and how much jiu-jitsu helps us in our everyday tasks and our everyday life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this quote by Helio Gracie. One of the books we're going to cover today for those following along in the YouTube. Let's see if we can get it in frame here. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Just an incredible quote by Helio: to teach those who don't know, to remind those who do know, and to correct those who think they know. I mean,
powerful. I
can't think of a better way to, really describe what my purpose is for this podcast.
Sure.
Right? So many of us think that we know.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You do. You walk your life and you're like, I know.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me that. And when you tell somebody something and they give you that feedback of, oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You're like, do you?
It's easy to feed your ego.
It is.
It's really easy to feed your ego.
It is, for sure. And a part of it is that we go back to episode 1 and episode 2 is where we at in our journey of our life, and where age can be a huge part of why you really want to make somebody believe that you know more than what you do, is because you don't want to seem dumb, or your ego gets in the way and pride gets in the way of anything. And so that's when, you have to remind yourself, or somebody reminds you. Maybe it's gentle, maybe it's not so gentle,
right. I think of like the scientific term, right? Cognitive dissonance.
Sure.
Right? We do a lot to protect our egoic state.
Yeah.
And we feed it, and it betrays us more often than not. I think that's that karmatic justice.
For sure.
That we get.
Yeah.
And no better place, or no quicker is that iterative process of feed the ego, be put in check than on the mats.
On the mats. Yeah.
On the mats.
And especially like for those of our listeners and for those of our friends, that if you are part of a journey, or if you're part of the jiu-jitsu community, you can understand and that class is class, and then there's always open mat or open roll, and that's where you can try those techniques that the professor shows or the instructor shows. And a lot of times they'll show a technique and you'll see that nobody even tries the technique in the open mat because it's so hard to fail, and you're going to fail in that moment. And so that's part of the journey of life also, is like, are you really willing to fail to get better?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to fail a lot in jiu-jitsu.
Oh man. If you're in the community, right? Like the community is pretty tight.
Yeah.
You'll follow a lot of jiu-jitsu things, and there's a quote, another podcaster out there that says jiu-jitsu is one of those things you just have to be comfortable sucking at.
Yeah, for sure. Right? Yeah. And you have so many people that are so passionate about it right now, and jiu-jitsu is in a really big growing stage because of ADCC this year, and because there's so many big personalities that are happening. And so you can follow along with those personalities. And then inside of our own community, we're growing so much, especially with Park City Jiu-Jitsu, where we have a very strong core group, and we have this our professor that's been up in Park City for 12 years, and he's changed locations, changed things, reinvented himself, fixed some things, and now he has another academy in Lehigh, and so it's almost like we're the big brothers, and then they're the little
Right,
brothers,
yeah.
and so there's a whole dynamic that he does so good with, and our little community in Park City is growing and thriving right now, I believe, and we're in a big growing stage for our community, and so we're able to experience that and able to enjoy that with the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's episode, specifically kind of this concept of white belt in everyday life, right? To build upon, reinvention. Sometimes we just have to approach things a little bit differently, right? We have to have the beginner's mindset, right?
Always.
We have to be curious.
Yep.
We have to constantly be curious. We have to try stuff.
Yeah.
And these are all metaphors that we're going to take to the mats here. And we're going to talk a lot about the mats today and what it took us to get on the mats. So
yeah. And also like how you can use the idea of white belt for life or white belt forever. And if you're not part of the community and you're listening, we encourage you to go to an academy and to experience it. But to always remember that what we're talking about is just beginner's mindset. It's like Tyler said, it's just a beginner's mindset and how you approach those things every day.
Right.
When you wake up, when you go to bed, it's just always willing for feedback, willing to accept it, and willing to digest feedback.
That's so funny because as I was, we wrapped up episode 2. I'm finishing the Design Your Life book that we talked about on that episode. Those are the 3 points that I applied. I was like, holy shnikes.
Yeah.
This is exactly perfect for, this white belt for life, right? It's beginner's mindset, be curious, try stuff, bias to action, right?
Yep.
Reframe problems, know it's a process, have awareness, and then my favorite, radical collaboration, right? Because that's where the process is rapid. You iterate through it quite rapidly.
Right. Open mat. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so we have, I'll kind of go into how I started.
Sure.
So I was coaching wrestling and I was fighting, thinking about fighting MMA. I'd had one fight, and in MMA, you go to a bunch of things, and I was a wrestler. You go to striking, you go to wrestling, and then there's jiu-jitsu. And I was like, well, I don't really need jiu-jitsu. I'm a wrestler, so what would I need jiu-jitsu for? I knew who Royce Gracie was. I knew about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I was like, nah, I'm a wrestler. And then I took a couple classes just before my first fight, and I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I wasn't really sold on the gi. I didn't really care for it that much because it stops a lot of things that a wrestler wants to do. So then I was like, well, I'll just like no gi then. And I was in the community for the MMA, and I didn't really want to do that anymore. And my coaching career for wrestling was kind of coming to a head because my younger son was entering high school, and I didn't really want to coach him in high school. And so he was doing jiu-jitsu as well. And when we moved to Heber, I had asked my MMA instructor if he knew somebody in Park City or if he knew somebody in Heber, and he told me about Mike Diaz. And he said, you got to go to Mike Diaz. Mike Diaz is a good guy. He's been up there for a while. He's been in the community for a while, and just go up there. And I was like, okay, I'll take Tristan to his class. And I called, talked to Mona, did the whole thing. Hey, I'm just moving up to Heber, looking for an academy. They said, yeah, bring Tristan to our class. Took him to the class, went in, and Mike and I started talking, and he's like, well, you should come try this. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll try it. And we were at the White Pines address, which is in Park City at that time, and the academy was awesome. It had a garage door that opened up to the mountain. It was awesome. And I finally was like, well, I'm going to try it because I was bored, and I had known at that point I didn't want to get punched in the face anymore, and I was done with that.
Yeah.
Took a class, and the first class that I went into was I went there, and then one of our friends, Chef, came in the same day. Him and I, and we knew each other from the MMA community, and we both were like, oh, this is awesome. We're going to be together. And him and I, we took the class together. Then we did the open mat. in the gi. And I was like, well, this is not that bad. This is kind of interesting. A couple days later, still doing class, and another friend who's been my training partner for as long as now in Park City, Preston, came in. So he came in, and I really enjoyed training with him. And then I decided at that point, okay, I'm going to give it a little bit more go. But what would happen is I would go to training in the off season of wrestling, but then during wrestling, I would miss out on a bunch of training because I was still coaching wrestling. And I was competing a little bit in the gi, and I won a couple things, and I just wasn't given enough time to jiu-jitsu, and I could tell that people were progressing faster than me. And I was like, man, I don't know what to do. And when I would talk to Mike, he would say, you just got to come to class. You just show up. You have to come to class. If you don't come to class, it's not like you're just going to be able to like learn it. Mm-hmm. You can't just watch YouTube.
I can't just buy a book.
You can't buy a book. And so that's how I walked into the door and started my journey of jiu-jitsu with Professor. And I've been with Professor as far as like my jiu-jitsu journey solely. I had some classes with a couple other guys before, but my whole class, all of my classes have been with Professor Mike or some of his people.
So the term professor, as those of us who are not in the jiu-jitsu community, what do we, right. why do we bestow that term kind of?
Yeah. So I've asked Mike this question before because, for those of you that don't know, you go into class and you can ask any question you want of the professor, and sometimes it's jiu-jitsu, sometimes it's not. A lot of times it's jiu-jitsu, and I wanted to know how come not every black belt is called a professor. And a professor is a 3-stripe or more black belt in the lineage that he's under.
Okay.
So there's other schools that probably call every black belt a professor, and I don't want to say that they're wrong or not, but this is how we do it.
Right.
We don't call Nick or Anthony professor because they're not a 3-stripe or more.
Right. Okay.
And then when you get to certain levels, you're a master, and then grandmaster is Grandmaster Alio.
And so obviously we've talked about the belts before, we've alluded to them before, but like really let's just touch on that for our listeners so they have some understanding as to what is the belt system mean. In my perspective, obviously, you look it up and it's the hours, but
it's always more.
There's always, you're right. There's always something more to that. You have to be seen by the community, by your professor, by your academy. There's more to it, but the bare minimum definition is hours. So how many rough hours is a 3-stripe black belt? Do you know?
I have no idea. I know the professor started his jiu-jitsu journey, I believe, in 1997. I think that's when he started with Pedro Sauer. I'll have to ask him. But now it's 2023, and so man, however many, he's been on the mat.
I noticed on the wall, right? It was 20 hours for each stripe,
right,
at the white belt level.
Yeah.
When you get to the black belt level, it's 100 hours per stripe.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect, right? In a year or something like that.
And years. I think it's 3 years for each stripe to a certain point, and then 5. Probably there's going to be some people that really understand that.
Right.
I'm always like, I have a hard time signing in still.
So the concept behind Professor is that they've dedicated their lives to this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's been points where they've had to enforce because they are a certain belt level, and someone's come into the academy with an ego.
Yeah.
But at the crux of it, a black belt is just a white belt who didn't quit.
Sure. And I think that's even Henzo Gracie. That's what Henzo Gracie said was a black belt, and he probably may have heard it from somebody else, from one of his the people that he looks up to, that a black belt is just a white belt that never quit and that continues to stay on the mat. Because imagine like how nervous you are as a white belt, and then how much pressure there is on when you get that black belt. That's every time you get a belt. That's what Professor always tells us is
right.
It's a heavy belt. feels heavy, and you know that it comes with weight every time you put the belt on.
Man, we just had a what did they call it? A ranking ceremony?
Yeah.
Is it a ceremony?
Yeah, a belt
Promotion ceremony.
Yeah.
And I love how professors the white belt is the only belt that you earn. You earn it by going.
Right.
Every other belt you're promoted to because they see progress, but the white belt is the one that you earn.
Yeah. The white belt is the one that he gives you.
He gives you. Is
After
that it?
yeah, the white belt is the one that they give you. Okay. After that, every belt you earn.
See, I'm such a freaking white belt.
I know. No, it's good. It is a way to look at it is with your promotions and with your stripes, you're really in line, or you're only working against yourself. You're not working, and that's where I think like people get lost is like you walk in with somebody that day, and maybe that person progresses a little bit faster, and in your mind you're like, well, how are they getting these accolades but I'm not? And that's where we lose some people, I think, is because they don't only focus on, the focus is only on yourself and what you're doing and where your journey is, and we can't compare ourselves to anybody else.
See, and I think that's why I love these individual sports, right?
Yeah.
And wrestling, anything that you're doing by yourself. I grew up, I played lacrosse. I started very young, and obviously lacrosse, there is a great amount of personal development, not like hockey or soccer, any of that. Right. And you can take it upon yourself. But a lot of times in these team sports, you can hide behind the performance of your other teammates. Right. And if the team loses, you can shake it off. And that doesn't necessarily promote you to get better. Like, it doesn't really build you to get better. Whereas you as an individual, you're the only contributor to the sport, wrestling, whatever, jiu-jitsu, we'll keep it in jiu-jitsu. You can see your progress. Right. And you realize, hey, the only way I can get better at this is if I show up, if I do it. You can't hide behind your team. It's true. You do need that collaboration. Right. You need other folks showing up at the academy. You got to have that uki.
You do. Yeah, you do.
Your training partner.
Yep. And you have to have, and each person has to know their own role. Yeah. In the academy, and the white belts have a role, the blue belts have a role, the purple belts have a role, the brown belts have a role, the black belts have a role, and then professor, he's in charge of all of those, and not so much even in charge, but he's kind of the general that oversees all of that. And I always think, how much pressure does he have in that instance? Because his job is to make sure he knows where Tyler's at, where Danny's at, and then where everybody else is in between, and all those little blendings. And he does rely on his upper belts to make sure that what he preaches, then we teach. Yeah. And you never want to get away from those things, because then it's too far away for him to come back and put it back into the order that we need to be in.
Right. This is the way.
Yeah. All right, Tyler. So that was a little bit of how I ended up into jiu-jitsu, and I'll get more into it. I mean, I'll continue to add more and some more details about that, but tell us how you ended up coming into jiu-jitsu, which we've already talked a little bit about that.
Yeah. 3 times into the gym.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? Like, I kind of started on a personal journey to reconnect with myself. I was looking for a community as I was going through a separation from my spouse. And, you listen to enough Jocko, Goggins, all those guys, and they all recommend things. But one thing that I heard time and time again was jiu-jitsu. And so I had a coworker that I knew. He was down at Unified. He was wild about jiu-jitsu, always talking about it. And I had been interested in taking a class for some time. I just didn't know really where to go. Right. And so he helped me. He kind of helped point out, like, hey, he just did a quick Google search and said, hey, Unified is, I believe, Pedro Sauer affiliated as well. And so he's like, hey, this academy is Pedro Sauer, aligned. And again, because it goes back to that heritage of where you learn that jiu-jitsu. For sure. It also happened to be convenient and close. So after, as I was searching for this community, or as I was searching for something, I started going into the academy.
Right.
I think I went in 3 different times until finally, man, Preston came out and was like, yeah, let's get you into a class.
Right.
So
yeah,
Preston is the thread that ties.
It is true. Yeah. Preston is great. And what belt are you now?
So I am currently a white belt.
White belt.
I've been putting in a lot of hours. I do know how to check in.
So it's a good skill set when you're a white belt.
Yeah. Just knowing how to tie your belt and checking in. Those are my 2. That's where I excel in the sport.
And you have 4 stripes?
I do currently have 4 stripes.
Which means what?
It means I've been around the gym for at least 180 hours, I believe is what it is. 80 hours.
80 hours.
And I'm working towards moving the, learning the what is it, 78?
The 88 moves?
88 moves.
Yeah.
The number's changed.
It always does.
And I always change it.
Yeah.
In my head.
Yeah.
The 88 moves to progress from white belt to blue belt.
White to blue.
My hope is I'll be competing in my second competition
right.
In July. Last one is a white belt, and then be prepared to take my test in August, September of this year.
Which is interesting because some people's journeys are just going to class.
Yeah.
Some people's are just going to class and open mat. And then Tyler and I both compete. We're still hobbyist competitors. We're not like to the level of where you don't compete in every competition. We pick and choose. But even that in itself is a whole nother animal of competition, right? Because
absolutely.
Your first competition was last August, around that time, right?
Yeah.
And how did you feel that first competition? Because you'd been training a little bit, but you hadn't competed at all.
I hadn't competed. It's interesting, right? Because I grew up with a pretty rocky childhood, right? Like, my parents were divorced and I didn't always feel safe in the world. And that started to show itself like after I was married, or if I would go into like a Costco and it was like really busy.
Right.
Dude, my fight or flight was so burnt out or so turned up that I was like constantly looking over my shoulder, constantly like didn't like to be around crowds.
Right.
And I didn't understand at the time that was my body trying to tell me something.
Mm-hmm.
But it was another big reason I chose Jiu Jitsu, right? Like I needed to retune that part of my body, the part of my body that was, so inflicted with, quote unquote, we'll call it trauma, or, and so I needed to like really put myself in situations where I'm at risk.
Right.
Like, so literally like I'm resetting myself because, when you're walking through a Costco, your fight or flight doesn't need to be on.
True.
When, Danny's on your back, sinking in that mataleo, that rear naked, that's probably a bigger time to, put on that fight or flight. So I had to relearn how to, navigate this fight or flight system, my nervous system that was just kind of wigging out.
Right.
On that note, like I'm constantly getting feedback in the class. I remember Nick was like, we were working on just putting on pressure, and he's like, Tyler, you're being too nice, right? Like I wore the nice guy mask for too long. So, you realize that these guys want you to get better. Nobody wants to hurt you, but you can put on a little bit more pressure, right? Like you need to do it a certain way in order for it to feel like a real world scenario. And so you can really learn the move.
Right.
If you're kind of half-assing it, then you're not really learning the real move.
Right.
But I do remember like the idea to compete came to me after a professor was like, do you have what it takes to actually break somebody's arm?
Right.
Like, could you do it?
Yeah.
Could you do it? And part of me was like, I'm going to go to the butcher shop. I'm going to buy a ham hock. I'm going to leg lock it, or I'm going to,
But they're going to get a baseball bat like you see on YouTube and try to break it.
Yeah. So I chose to compete because inside the academy, right? Like you are fighting, but it just ups the level of the competition, right?
Sure.
Like there's just something about the competition. This person doesn't know you. He doesn't have to see you again. You want to be a good competitor and you're not working dirty, but like the level of pressure I'm putting on him is I want to smash you into the mat.
Right.
Right. Versus where, you and I may do that to each other, but at the end of the day, we also may have rounds where we're, a
little bit more gentle to each other.
A little bit more gentle to each other. Right.
Plus we we are still training partners, so we need each other,
Yeah.
and we don't want to hurt each other to make sure that like you don't come back for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. How often, all of you guys out there listening, how often that a white belt is, they call him, and I don't mean this mean, but like a spazzy white belt, and all of a sudden you've had to grab him and give him a little lesson that you shouldn't be spazzy, and next thing you know, you don't see that person for a couple of weeks, and you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that.
It has been really interesting that I've seen other white belts come and go in my journey, and it's only been a little over a year that I've started this. Guys that I'd see pretty regularly have kind of fallen off.
Sure.
Whether it's being
life gets in the way.
Yeah.
And ego can get in the way, and you just don't feel like you're learning. But when you're a competitor in jiu-jitsu especially, there are very, very clear risks, and there's very clear things that can happen that can hurt you.
Right.
Where you could be out for a little bit, and you're like, man, you're a working guy, you're a husband, you're a father. You're like, oh man, do I have this? Do I have it in me to compete?
Right.
Do you?
But I mean, I mean, I went 1-1, and the couple of things I wish I would have known before I went into my competition was one, I kind of asked Professor. Professor was like, I think everybody should compete at every level. But I didn't know if that was like an explicit, like, hey, this is a thumbs up, go do this. Right. I just went ahead and signed up anyway.
Sure.
Maybe you should have talked to him a little bit more about, am I ready to participate?
Sure.
My first match, I think I did great. I won the match by advantage. I did see an opportunity to finish a choke, but I was listening to my coach, and my coach just had me working on things. And so that's being coachable,
right?
Kind of just listening, and I not really trusting my own instincts.
Sure.
There was a clear opportunity to sink in a rear naked and probably win by submission rather than advantages. But, the one thing I forgot to do, which again my coach told me to think about, was breathe.
Sure.
And I came off the mats, and I literally I wanted to die. I wanted to die.
I remember.
I wanted to die, and I knew I had to do it again in less than 7 minutes.
Yeah, because in jiu-jitsu, like the tournaments, you fight.
Yeah,
and we call it fighting, and some guys don't like that you call it fighting because you're not getting punched in the face. But the way that we term it to describe is fighting. When you compete at the tournament, you go back to back to back to back, and you could be from one mat to another if you're doing 2 tournaments. And that's happened to some of our friends where they weren't prepared to go back to back to back and then run across to another mat back to back. And you can see that it really is in their mind a fight. It really is. And it could be a fight with yourself. It could be a fight with your body. It could be a fight with the other person.
Right.
But in your mind, it's the closest thing to a fight. That's what I loved about it.
Yeah.
I always knew I was going to compete. I always knew that I was going to try to win a world title in my own age division. And I'm a master 3, I think now. And I knew that I was going to fight because I like that idea of this is the closest thing to a fight without having to get punched in the face or arrested in the bar.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, my motivation was not dissimilar. My motivation was very much, do I have what it takes, man?
Yeah.
As I prepared for my next challenge, this next one coming up in July, open mat, man, I faced a huge fear. And I think that's what being in the gym is all about, is kind of facing those fears. But I let Anthony throw me yesterday. I got a baptism.
Oh my gosh.
A jiu-jitsu baptism.
Our friends and family know who Anthony is. For those of you that don't, he's a monster black belt.
Yeah.
Grew up wrestling in Pennsylvania, so that tells you how great his wrestling is.
Right. Very
athletic and knows how to move well.
Yeah. Right. And, I knew exactly, maybe I didn't realize, I knew.
Sure.
I stood with him. I knew as soon as I stood with him, this is probably not going to end well, but I need to face this fear. And he made it quick. I won't say it was painless, but he definitely made it quick.
Yeah.
And I think the whole gym stopped for a second as they heard me just
which always happens.
I hope my soul leaves my body.
Yeah, because there's that. Yeah. No, and that's the best part about when you find the academy that fits you well.
Yeah.
Is there's these characters and there's these people there that you know and you love, and we can describe them and we can be friends with them, and they're our tribe. And we may not meet each other any other place except for on the jiu-jitsu mat. No. And now we find this common ground, this common unity that we go back to, this community. And here we are talking about just our journey to becoming a white belt, just our journey into jiu-jitsu. And we have so much more topics, so much more to now share. And now it will help evolve, and it will help bring back what we're trying to do here. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build this community. We're trying to build a common unity. And how Tyler and I met was through jiu-jitsu, was through jiu-jitsu. We had our kids went to school together, so we had that in common. But we were driving down to a tournament, and we just started talking. We just started talking amongst each other, amongst ourselves, and found out that we have similar backgrounds, similar ideologies, and also similar thoughts of how we wanted to help men and how we wanted to help further gain following and gain space with other people. That's kind of how we came to this place where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like the quote we started with says, to remind those that think they know.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it. You were a great reminder as I was early in my journey here in jiu-jitsu. Right. And I like to think of jiu-jitsu as like a great metaphor for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Right. We talk about having a plan and asking questions and, stepping onto the mat. Like the first thing you got to do if you want to reinvent yourself is you have to take that first step.
You do.
Right. You just like stepping onto the mat first time, it's going to require you to be, to get outside of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is not, necessarily all that healthy. Right. You got to enjoy the struggle a little bit.
You do.
You got to enjoy getting uncomfortable. I think the fun thing going through the academy right now is, leche de padre. Yeah. If you can get on mount and you suffocate your opponent with your nipple, then you get some bragging rights for the day. But it's that community, right, that helps us strive to be better in the rest of our life.
Right. Yeah, and we're always trying to find the balance of life, health, wellness, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And when you start your journey with jiu-jitsu, when you tie that white belt on, and a lot of times you don't even really know how to tie the belt, and so somebody will come around and they'll help you, or you'll keep asking, hey, can you show me how to tie that belt again? And most people are so nervous to ask. You'll see them over there fiddling with their belt, trying to look, and does it look right? Does it feel right? And everybody goes through that. Everybody goes through that initial thing of what is it? How's it supposed to look when I tie it? What side's the black bar supposed to go on? We had that conversation on Sunday. And the best part about it is every person that you talk to, every person that I speak to, all come back to the same thing. Jiu-jitsu's changed my life. Jiu-jitsu makes my life better. And without jiu-jitsu, I would be a totally different person. Yeah. And I believe that about myself. I believe that 100%, that Professor, I tell him this all the time. Meeting him completely changed the path of my life. Mm-hmm. Completely. It completely changed who I was. I thought I was going to coach wrestling a lot longer. Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to have my boys in college going to wrestling. I thought that I would get a national champ sometime for wrestling. And once I started my jiu-jitsu path, all of that stuff went by the wayside. And now I'm like, I can't wait to see what my kids will do in the kids program. I can't wait to see what Professor shows us. And I can't wait to see who I'm going to meet and be able to encourage to continue down this path.
That's so cool. Such a cool philosophy to have. And, for me, very similar, right? There's been a very somatic therapeutic response, sure. Right? One, working through the breathing. Two, putting myself in situations that would be dangerous, and gaining the confidence to escape those situations, because the white belt is all about protecting yourself.
Yep.
It's all about protecting yourself. If you don't tap a single person your first year, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
If you protect yourself and they're not tapping you,
Yeah.
that's the wins. Those are the wins as a white belt.
100%. Yeah. Like you have to think about like longevity, not only in jiu-jitsu, but in life. Like, what is it going to take for you to stay in the fight?
Yeah.
It's being healthy.
Yeah.
Being healthy is the most important thing. Like, Professor always says, your number one job is to stay healthy.
Absolutely.
Then your number two job is to not tap. That's the number two job.
Right.
But if you tap, it's okay. Like,
Right.
it's not, your first job is not to get hurt.
Right.
Second job, try not to get tapped. Third job, find opportunity.
Well, and it's a progressive elaboration, right?
Yep.
You may tap to a move early on because you're nervous and you don't know. That's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. It's the first magic move that stops all the pain and all the embarrassment. They teach you right away. Tap.
Yep.
Tap. And there's no shame in tapping. Unlike quitting, there's no shame in tapping.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah. We want to help keep you in the game. And because I started at an older age, you started at an older age, so our bodies aren't the same. And so we do get hurt. We do have some beaten up parts that we're like, oh man, that hurts today. Can I make it to class? Yes. Can I train? Yes. But do I need to be smart? Yes.
Yeah.
Not like some of our younger guys that train and they can go 100 miles an hour today, go back to the night class, 100 miles an hour again.
Yeah.
Some people are built that way, and that's okay. The same thing with life.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same kind of things. Can you go to the fight?
Mm-hmm.
Can you stay in the fight? Can you find your path?
Yeah.
Can you find that path to staying through the day and fighting for the good fight?
Yeah, I think so. It goes back to having a plan.
Having a plan.
Right?
Yeah.
What is your plan when you step onto those mats?
Right.
And there is a very good alliteration to your life there, right?
Right.
Again, I just love that jiu-jitsu is the metaphor for your life.
Yeah.
You can adapt it,
It's true. Yeah. And when we're probably going to continue this conversation in further episodes. Maybe we'll make this a couple part series just so that we can round about what our thoughts are on this. Cause we kind of dive down what got us here, how come we're here. And there's going to be a lot of questions from people or even corrections for what we said or what we do. And that's where I'm like, I've had to learn the most.
Yeah.
Learn the most is like, there's going to be people that correct you, whether they correct you with words or whether they correct you with a very strong attack on a limb that you are not prepared for.
Right. It's true.
Yeah. Because you can go to sleep, but you can't come back from
A broken
arm.
torn out shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blown out knee.
Yeah. All those things can happen. And you hope that they don't, but they do happen in our journey.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that our journey stops. It means that we have to figure out ways around that. And can you make it on the mat? Can you make it to tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the idea. That's the idea I have, is to keep this conversation of jiu-jitsu going and keep this conversation of how it affects us and how we address it and apply it to our everyday life.
Yeah. We got to apply that beginner's mindset to everyday life.
Always.
You're a white belt.
You are.
White belt. And if you go into any situation where you're frustrated, you're annoyed, what can I learn from this? What being curious, what can I try? What kind of experiments can I perform to have a bias for action? How do I reframe problems? So often our brain gets stuck in its neural pathway that we can't escape, right? So many times I have to, get out of myself.
Sure.
Get back in touch, whether it's taking some deep breaths so I can reframe a process, detach and gain some perspective, and just know life is a practice. Jiu-jitsu is a practice.
It is.
Just keep after it. Keep attacking it. Keep up with that awareness.
Yeah. Don't give up.
Hone that awareness skill.
Don't give up, because one day you're going to be a father. You're going to be a husband. You're going to be a black belt. And you're going to have all that experience to fall back on because you never gave up. And now you just get to restart.
Yeah.
Every day you get to restart. And I've heard it from black belts all the time.
Yeah.
That once I put my black belt on, it was like my journey started over.
Yeah.
I felt that way. I feel that way about my blue belt. I felt that way about my purple belt. I felt like I'm just starting over in a different part of my journey. And I enjoy the journey. I tell people all the time, just enjoy the journey. We are not in a sprint. We are not trying to sprint to the finish.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Man, I can't thank you enough for today.
Yeah.
It's that radical collaboration, man.
Yeah.
Whether it's be on the mats, whether it be in life, like men need other good men, right?
Yeah.
So that we can, remind each other when we think we know.
Yeah. When you think you know. And like we always said, we train at Park City Jiu Jitsu. That's where Tyler and I train. If you aren't in Park City, or if you're not in Heber, we know of a lot of places that we can send you to. If you're not in Utah, the thing that we do is we always just ask Professor. So if you need something, if you're looking for an academy, you're looking for something, you're looking to start your journey, drop us a line. Let us know.
Where can where can they find us, Danny? Where can they find us?
Yeah, so on Instagram, Facebook, compassionate_gentleman, Park City Jiu Jitsu, train there all the time. Yeah. And how about you, Tyler?
Yeah, if you're looking for the Lost Boy Scouts, always hit up the Lost Boy Scouts website, hello@lostboyscouts.com, or Lost Boy Scouts on Instagram and or Twitter. And we will we'll help you get started. We'll help you get started, or we'll help be a part of your community and a part of your journey. Appreciate you guys tuning into this episode, whether it be on your favorite podcast channel, or if you've picked up the YouTube because you like the extra content and seeing our pretty faces.
Our pretty faces. And don't forget, if we've said something that you don't agree with, that you do agree with, that you'd like to find out more, you'd like to give us some more of your space, Sunday, open mat, 11 o'clock.
Yep, that's where we settle it. Don't bother leaving a comment. Just show up to open mat.
Take care.
See you.
See you guys.
Rise up to turn it back.